So our event tonight, as you all know, because you are here, is we have Hilary Marsh, who is going to talk to us about making content strategy stick, operationalizing and social. Whoa, social. Someone needs to mute maybe, and socializing your work. So if you like I think many of us have experienced, gone to a lot of work to create some great. Oh, I'm muted now.
I just unmuted you. Sorry.
Okay. if you have done some wonderful content strategy work and then had a little trouble getting it sort of moving or getting it sort of unstuck in your organization, that's what Hilary is here to share some advice about. So a couple of other little notes. We will share Hilary's slides after the event, so don't feel like you have to frantically take notes or anything. This is also being recorded, so we'll make the recording available on the meetup, the meetup site and on our Slack channel. And as far as if you have questions for Hilary, just put them in the chat. She'd like this to be, fairly conversational, so we'll keep an eye on that. If there's something that seems like would be good to kind of have her expand on, as she's speaking, we'll interrupt her with that. Otherwise, we'll have time at the end to kind of have a more just kind of general conversation. So put your questions in the chat as you have them, and we'll get to them either during or after the meetup. So with that, welcome, Hilary. I will stop sharing here.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm very, very excited to be here. It's always good to see faces, always good to connect with people. I spend far too much time by myself in my home office, so I'm very happy to do it. So I gave this talk first at Confab, so it was in the library. So any of you who were at Confab, although no names sound familiar except Carrie, you were there, but you might have seen it there. And I'll be giving it again, but I really wanted to give it to you all in person. So let me share my screen. And if you decided it's this one. Always a challenge. Can you see this?
Yes, looking good.
Yes.
All right. So I wanted to start with a thought. So content strategy is figuring out all the aspects of how an organization's content is going to work. Hold on, let me move this up. And content operations, or operationalizing and socializing content strategy, is about executing all of those decisions every day and putting it all into action. So that's really what this talk is about. So there's three parts, right? 1, build a strong foundation. 2, foster champions and allies. And 3, keep content practices top of mind. So, so build from the foundation. And I found this picture today, and I really liked it, except for that milk jug in the middle, which I couldn't find another one without that. But this is a good foundation, and it's super important to start with the work you've done already and really honor that. So it's likely that when you started the content strategy effort, everything was in chaos. And so I wanted you all to put in a chat, like, how was it in chaos? So let's just start there. And I cannot see the chat, so I don't know how to do that. Let's see more chat. Yeah, I can.
Hilary, I can read stuff off as it comes in if you'd like.
No, I figured out how to do it.
Okay.
A lot of inconsistencies, yep. Anything else? No style guides, yep. Structure, what's that? I love that. Tone and voice, yep. All over the place. Decentralized ownership. Accidental duplications. I was the only UX writer. Nobody cared for the content. Yep. Silos. Oh my gosh. No style guides, no nothing. Yep. So, and I found, in addition to all of these, which is so good, all of these suggestions are terrific. the organization might not have even known what content they had, right? If somebody left, if somebody took off a link from a landing page or from a home page, or if an initiative ended, maybe the content was still there and they didn't even know it. Maybe there were no rules or guidelines for how the content should work, what it should sound like, what its goals are, who decides how it gets promoted, or what goes on the homepage. It might have had multiple systems, multiple CMSs, LMS, if you're an association management system, CRM, et cetera, and do all those things agree? And is all the content in there and coming out of there the same? But fortunately, they had you. And hold on. And you did the work, right? So, and you worked really hard to put down that strong foundation. So many moving parts, so many pieces of work, so much effort went into there. You wrote it down. You may have created a wiki to store it and share it and make sure it has an opportunity to evolve. You presented the work and you presented to the new guidelines to the subject matter experts, as well as maybe to management, as well as marketing and communications and IT. And it's important to make sure that this foundation that you've led is really strong, right? That you grounded the guidelines in research, that you tested things, that you mapped out the roles and processes, and that you identified what tools you'll use. So why does it keep doing this? So once you did your work, now the content was beautiful, right? Answer, right? Yes or no? So you did the work. Wiki Queen on my team. Yeah. So you did the work and did it all work, right? So the question is, did it, the content is neat and organized from front to back. It proceeds in an orderly fashion from conception all the way through to expiration and archiving, and everyone participates in the full process exactly like they should. So now you can finally take a step back and enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? So, right? Nodding or, yeah, well, exactly. So, I wish, exactly. Sounds really good. So you might think, as I did for a long time, you might think that documents are enough to turn content chaos into a well-oiled machine. And yeah. So not the case, really. So I created a content strategy roadmap. And I laid out, here's the process for creating a content strategy. So this is sort of what was in the word cloud, right? First, do the discovery, understand the organization side of things. So talk to the stakeholders, review various strategic documents, understand the dynamics and goals of the audience. So either that's surveys or personas, ideally personas and journeys, to do the content audit and to do a comparative audit, to develop guidelines, rules and life cycles on the content governance, right? So this is all of our work, right? So this is, okay, so now we're done. We hand all the documents to the client, and then what? So often, all too often, really, when I went to check back with the client after 6 months or several months, so how's that going? They were like, yeah, something else took precedence over that. We haven't really gotten to it. Or we were gonna, but then, the person who was leading the effort left. And so often the documents sort of sat on a shelf gathering dust. And that really broke my heart. And it broke my heart because not only was my work wasted, and their money was wasted, their time and their effort and their vision was wasted. And so here's what I realized. Content strategy documents are aspirational. So does anybody want to share like what that might mean? What does it mean? Content strategy documents are aspirational. You have the best intentions. Whoop, yep, starting point. Yep, we'll do it. Exactly, we'll do it when we have time, money, staff. We hope that everyone will read them and apply them perfectly. Exactly. So, so the documents themselves describe the future state. They articulate what will be. And it took me a long time to really put this together. And the reality is, just because you've written things down doesn't mean everybody knows about them. Because there's turnover. It doesn't mean everybody remembers them, and it doesn't mean everyone uses them. So people are busy. They have short memories, and not only that, the status quo has tremendous magnetic pull. So putting content strategy into action is about more than just documents. So last year I went back to the roadmap and I added 2 other steps. The first step is staffing. And I have a staffing calculator that I created that actually broke the content creation process down step by step by step. And it took it further than anything I'd seen out there in the world, because it talked about the balance of the work between like the web team and the subject matter expert, because somebody needs to spend that time creating it, doing the research, doing the review, doing the fact checking. And if the web team doesn't do it, the subject matter expert has to do it. If the subject matter expert doesn't do it, then the web team has to do it. And the organization has to staff properly for the quality of content they're looking for. And that putting those kinds of tasks into people's job description is a huge missing part, I think. So not only staffing needs, but planning for training and communications. So that these documents aren't, these rules and these processes and this new way of working isn't just a document that sits on a shelf, but it becomes things that people are trained on when they join the organization, just like other things that they learn. So, and communications, sharing success stories, sharing what worked, why it worked, teaching people, training them and communicating with them. So the second step is fostering champions and allies. So you don't have to go this alone, right? And in fact, you shouldn't. But sometimes you have to kind of build the army before you can lead it. So I wanted to take a step back for a moment and think about why organizations find themselves in the kind of pickle that content strategy can help solve. So this isn't just an empty philosophical question. I think it's something that we all need to understand in order to truly solve this problem. So content is all the things that the organization does. And I say this, and I want you to say this to your colleagues when you go back, because our content, everything we do arrives in the world as content, words and pictures and audio and video. So if we have a product that arrives in the world as content, then a content strategy for that product is inextricably connected with the business strategy for that product. But the person who creates the content about the product is a product developer. So when you say content strategy, they hear wah, 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 like Charlie Brown, but really you're talking about working with them in partnership to make the content about their thing, their work, better, resonate more with the audience. So they're product developers, they're instructional designers, they're economic researchers, they're government lobbyists, they're whatever they do, but the work that they produce is content. And so I say this sort of over and over a million times during a project to really make that point stick, because the work, the material, the matter that we're working with is their work. So pretty soon, when you talk to them here, we're talking about your product, but it's your product. And this is one of the reasons why the staffing piece is so important, because this is really, at the end of the day, a lot about accountability. So if you're talking about, when you're talking about content strategy for our company's product, the person managing that product thinks, well, that's my product. And it kind of looks like this. So at the end of the day, before content strategy is about the words, before it's about technology, before it's really about digital, it's really a people challenge. So the old way of thinking before the internet existed, and still in many organizations today, is that each department who did the work, and I say departments because in associations, that's how they break things up. Some organizations call them divisions. Some have different business units, whatever you might do, but it's a thing. It's a collection of people doing a piece of work. So let's just call it departments. So back in the day, each department decided independently, what's the content, what's the format, what's the channel, and how do I get it to the audience? And this is literally a picture of silos. And this is how the world worked. That's the only way the world could work before the internet came along. And the challenge is when all these content format channel things arrived on the single homepage next to each other, their differences and disparities and redundancies and conflict or contradictions became that much more obvious. So now we kind of have to work together. So here's the new thinking, right? We are a single organization with a set of programs and offerings, products, services, information, resources, tools, blah, blah, blah. And there's a reason that we're not an organization that just does one thing or produces one product, because it makes sense to have more things we can offer to our audience. So, so doing that means that that collection or suite of programs and offerings is expressed through a set of content and formats and channels that then gets shared out with our audiences. And the beauty of this is that the old way, the audience was just a passive receptor who waited to receive whatever the organization sent to them. And now they have an opportunity to discover the other things that the organization offers to them. So this gets back to business strategy, because if this weren't really the picture, it would just be a one product organization, a one program organization. So, so effective content needs a partnership between people with expertise in a particular subject matter, whether it's product, program, service, blah, 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 and people with expertise, all the folks on this call, all the folks watching this video later, hopefully, expertise in presenting and sharing the content about all that subject matter so that it resonates with the audience, so that it is consistent with the rest of the stuff, so that it's presented as a package that makes sense. So, hold on. Where are we now? Oh, good. So I believe that you need, before you get buy-in from the top to work in a new way, you need to build this process. So let's take it from the right to the left. At the end of when you have buy-in, it means that you have a set of policies that has been blessed by management, that everybody knows, understands, and uses. But you can't get there until you can say, well, the CEO says this is how we work now. Well, so you can't meet with the CEO and get that buy-in. Do we have your blessing to go forward and work in this new way? Until you can assure the CEO that your new way will work. And in order to do that, you have to do a pilot project or several. And before you do that, you have to find the champions to do that pilot project with, or the allies. Make sense? So I bet you know who the allies are in your organization already. I bet you, let me say it better because it didn't come out right. I bet you already know who the allies in your organization are. Words came out jumbled. And they're the people who've been chomping at the bit to do their content differently. They want to try a new channel. They want to, they were the early social media adopters. They want to, they were the early people who wanted infographics, or who didn't want infographics, or who wanted to embrace new functionality or a new volume of content, or whatever it is that they want. They want to connect better. They want to have their content taxonomy powered. But they're the people who've been really listening, who really get it, and who really are eager to work in a better way and produce their content in a better way. And those are the people you do the pilot projects with. So hold on, let's see. I have some notes. Yeah. So at this point, these are my notes. Because no one's using the content strategy, it's still essentially a draft. All the work that you did, all the documentation you did, all those guidelines and policies that we put together is really a draft, a work in progress. And that's good, right? It's an ideal way to try it out. So enlist those allies to do the pilot projects and try it out. So in 2017, I co-led with Carrie Hain and Dina Lewis a big major study of content strategy adoption and maturity in content-rich organizations. And we found that many organizations start their content strategy work with a small group of people who see the positive difference that content strategy can make. So in the past, when it came to this point, I felt protective of my work. But ultimately, I discovered two things. One, that trying it out made the work better, and that trying it out with someone in partnership went a long way toward building better relationships and engendering trust, which is really often a precious commodity. So this is a time for learning and experimentation, right? So it's a tremendously valuable opportunity to learn under the radar. You have a vision for how things should work. You are pretty sure it's right, but you're not sure because it's still just words on a page or values in a CMS or something, but it's not anything that people have been living with and working with. And so then you want to establish preliminary goals, you want to measure results, and it might work and it might not work, but this is how you learn. And after you've done a pilot project or two with a subject matter expert, then after you've made your mistakes and gotten better, after you've done your initial learning, then it's time to go to that executive and have the meeting, right? And sell the idea of of doing it on a larger scale. So here's literally the agenda. So you might have the meeting with the executive, and by executive, I mean the CFO, not the CFO, Chief Marketing Officer, or the Senior VP of something, or the CEO, depending on the size and shape of your organization. But it's the person who has the power to approve this new way of working, that executive. And your agenda is 4 things. And if it's a very hierarchical, very large organization, it might not be even you having the meeting, but your boss or your boss's boss. But you have to give them the material to have this 4-item agenda meeting. one, we have a problem. So we have a problem that people are not buying these products because they don't even find the content about the products, or the content is here, but then the help content is over there, and then you buy it over here, and you don't know who to call, and so we're having a lot of customer frustration. Or people are only doing this, but we don't have a taxonomy, so there's no connection. So you identify what the problem is, and then you say, I know how to fix it. And I know how to fix it because I'm an experienced content strategist. I have, created all these guidelines and policies, and I know that this new way is going to work because we've done pilot projects. So I have, success under the belt, that we used to do it this way and it didn't work. And we tried it this new way for this set of things. And look, the results are that much better. And so then I'd like your approval to move forward. Once you have the approval, then you're golden, because then nobody can opt out of it because the CEO has said, yep, got it. This is how we're going to work. So I wanted to stop here for a second and just invite you to ask any questions or express skepticism, or what do you think? Let's open the chat. Chat 11.
Yeah, we'll just invite folks, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. Actually, Hilary, one thing I wanted to say is I just pulled down that paper that you and Carrie and Dina did. Should I drop a link to that in the chat? I think it's
I have all the links. I have links to the UX Booth article where I have a whole article about this executive buy-in called How to Sell Content Strategy to Management. I have another one about the staffing calculator, and I've put all the resources that I mentioned on a single slide at the end.
Great. Okay.
Good. All right. So one of the things that I have found really helpful with subject matter experts is to reframe how we talk about stuff. So they're going to say, well, it's my content. I get to decide where it goes, what it says, how it is. And you're like, well, what are you talking about? You're not even a trained writer. I'm the trained communicator, and I'm the trained content strategist. So then, so changing the way we talk about the work, that it's our work, it's our products, it's our content, really is a subtle, but I find effective way to help shift people's points of view. So you want to invite subject matter experts into the process. So our content, so one of the things that I tend to say over and over as a mantra in walking people through, what does this mean for me? That's the biggest question that I find people have. So here we have this whole new set of guidelines and policies. Not have at it, but this will be the operating way going forward. Nobody likes that, and especially not from a colleague. So instead, I have made sure to include them in the work along the way. Include them at the beginning, include them after I've done the audit, and I say, here's what I found with your content. Let's discuss it and talk about what this means going forward. What do you get to stop doing? What might you want to do more of, because it's hugely popular, because people don't always know what the metrics are for their content. So, and this is going to be something that we do together, because it is a partnership, and you have to show that it's a partnership. You have to act in partnership and model the behavior that you want them to do. And you want to make sure to listen to their concerns and understand their goals, because not only their goals, but their challenges, who they're accountable to, what they're measured on. Because if your recommendations are in conflict with what they're charged with doing, they're never, ever, ever going to do it with you. Whether you are a consultant or whether you're internal, it's super, super, super important to really understand the culture and the considerations that they live with every day. And that's, again, how to be their best partner in doing it differently. And reinforce what they're doing well now and why it's good. So, if they're publishing content on a predictable schedule, if the headlines are really user focused, show them what a positive difference that makes. Or show them what the pilot project did and how the before, didn't reach its goals, and the after, now it did. The whole goals question, people are often, like, you ask them, well, what's your goal? The goal is to get it out there. Why are you asking me? So you have to teach them how many people looked at their content last time, or really probe to understand what the action or perception or what the value proposition for that content is. And then help them make that measurable, and then go measure it and talk about how it did, and use that as a framework or a springboard to have more data-driven decisions. And extend their good work with education. So show them the next step. And that other piece that's really critical, and the reason that I prefer creating personas with internal staff people doing the work, is versus an audience survey, is to help them put themselves in their audience's shoes and spend time really thinking about, what is that person's life like? What context do they consume your content in? And what might that tell you? If they're busy, whether, they're busy with their career, they're busy with their family, they're busy with whatever they're busy with, do they really have time to read a 38-page PDF, for example? Never, right? Never. So it helped them see that collaboration and content reuse is a win-win. So shift the story that they're telling to their boss about what content success is. Maybe it's not 38 toolkits. Maybe it's 3 toolkits that everybody uses. So maybe it's, instead of volume of number of content, maybe it's results from a smaller set of content. So it allows them, for example, more time to focus on less stuff in order to really achieve a more substantial goal. So, and then the third piece is keeping content practices alive. So at the end of the day, a lot of times our content strategy work ends up being a lot like this kind of book. So this is literally the book of how to drive, everything you need to know to drive in Illinois, the rules of the road. So I took a screenshot so you could just see the level of detail. And I get to this level of detail when I do governance documents sometimes. And a lot of times a style guide gets to this kind of level of detail, but this book is 112 pages long. Here are the chapters. So it's literally everything you might want to know. Now, I drive in Illinois. Have I read this book cover to cover? No. And in the same way, your subject matter experts are not reading your content strategy documents end to end either. So, and we didn't always need this, right? So yeah, fortunately, we don't just hand out keys to a car and the book and say, okay, good luck. Instead, we have all kinds of things that we use in our life as drivers, and pedestrians for that matter, that teach us the rules of the road. So we have road signs. So these road signs didn't always exist. In when I wrote it down, hold on. When cars were invented, none of this existed because it wasn't needed, right? Horses didn't crowd the roads, and drivers could see each other. So the first electric traffic light, this is the part that I didn't remember, was installed in Cleveland, Ohio in 1914. And since then, we've developed this whole language of signs, and we teach people what they mean. We test them on what they mean. And there's a system, a consistent system from place to place within the US and to a smaller degree around the world that give drivers cues about how things work, right? So we have the don't walk sign, which looks a little different in Canada. This is a Canada one, which my kids laughed hysterically at the first time they saw it, and they were like mimicking the guy. This is from London, where they have enough visitors who don't drive on the left side of the road and don't walk with drivers who drive on the left side of the road, that they have to have signage on the floor to indicate to pedestrians, make sure that you don't step out into traffic. So, and there's a lot that we can adapt from this kind of thinking to our work, right? So so we have the system of road signs. We teach people what they are. We test them in a safe environment. We test them on the road before we give them a driver's license. So are there ways that we could do things like this for content? Could we let people try it in a private kind of environment? Could we let people pass a test in order to have greater levels of permission in the content management system? Could we have a reward system that shows that they've earned our trust, and maybe they become mentors to other people who are just learning or doing? And so this is the built-in organic reward system. We also have in a driver situation, do I have this? No, we also have the stick, right? So it's a carrot and it's a stick. So if you mess up, if you don't follow the rules, there's a risk you'll get a ticket, or there's a risk, unfortunately, that you'll, have an injury of some kind to yourself, to the car, to somebody else. And that's what we want to avoid. So the stakes are not quite as high for content, although depending on the confidentiality or various other kinds of risks that content can pose, they could be pretty high in a different way. But we have to have the carrot and the stick in the same kind of way, and just think a little bit creatively on what we can create. So I've had workshops where I have people go through this effort to think about what are the carrots, kind of, and what are the sticks that they could think of for content that's similar to driving. So I think there's tremendous thinking that we can take with us. So content governance topics, this sounds like the rules of the road book, right? So, but this is the raw material that we have to look at. What are the life cycles for different kinds of content? So we use what we got and what we saw in the content audit to make decisions about how long does content stay relevant? How long should it, based on interest or based on relevance or based on, need? What should the team structure and staffing look like? What kind of oversight do we need for different kinds of content, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to read all these to you. So one of the things I like to say is that content strategy is an HR issue. And people go, what? What does that mean? And I keep looking over here because on my screen, you're on the right, but I know that you're not. Anyway, so content strategy is an HR issue because content work needs to be baked into people's job description. Because if it's not, they're too busy. They already have a full-time job. And if their full-time job needs to shift to allow for more time to think about their content in a different way, well, that's an HR conversation. That is not a change that you can possibly make. Whatever level of title you have in the organization, you can't tell somebody how to spend their day. But HR can, and their boss can. So yeah, content work needs to be an official part of people's jobs. It needs to be part of what they're measured on, part of what their bonus is based on, or their raise, or their continued employment, and all that stuff, just like everything else. Yeah, so if, for example, the organization wants people to work collaboratively, that needs to be in there too. So then there's communications and training. So I've sort of alluded to a lot of these points before. So provide regular reminders and updates. We've added this field to the CMS. We're going to implement this policy now. share successes, show people, show everyone content improvement that really produced a better result. Establish communities of practice, include content training and employee onboarding, and make it part of people's professional development. Make it easy to succeed. So this is a bowling alley, a little with bumpers. So the kid can't get a gutter ball. So make it impossible for somebody to fail or harder, right? So create content request forms with information that they need to think through before they submit a request for something to be published. Build things into your CMS. So build guardrails into the CMS. So whether that's help text or limitations or whatever. Build in a review process that can't be skipped. Include the work in people's job description, blah, blah, blah. So motivation science, I'm going to talk about this for 1 second. So peer pressure, habits, progress. So here's an example of kind of peer pressure. So this is one of those electric reports. I don't know if they have these in Seattle or where the rest of you live, but this is an example from ComEd from Chicago, our utility company. And this is how your electricity use compares to your neighbors. And it's, you are at the bottom. Here's all your neighbors, the black stripe. And the green one is your energy efficient neighbors. And the first group of people who, and so this has been in existence since 2009, and here's a link to the article about it, which is really interesting. And so this got people to reduce their electricity use by 2%. So this is peer pressure at work. So is there some sort of chart or output that you can get from your CMS or from a system or anything that shows how your content is doing compared to your neighbors? Is there a way, you know, that you can put a peer pressure like this in place? What about real-time feedback? Whether it's something sort of like Hemingway, where it shows you, hey, the sentence could be improved, or something that shows you in real time. And reward successes, whether that's, you know, a pack of M&Ms for every something you increase, whether it's, you know, a little cheesy award that you give out at a quarterly meeting you have, whether it's a sneaky kind of swag like a pencil with one of the content principles written on it that you give out as a reward. So there's definitely ways to reward success, or literally M&Ms. But, you know, there's themes here. So, and bring the artifacts of your work to life, right? So show people, like when you do an audit, show people which categories have the most content, or take your content strategy statement that you've created and frame it and hang it somewhere when we're back in the office, AKA. And choose artifacts to highlight that brought the most insights. So whatever that might be. So literally a physical something. So one of the physical things that I have really found the most helpful are empathy-based personas. So here's an example of what one looks like. This is actually a couple screenshots from a client, United Educators. And here we have the guy, and here we have his motivations and fears. And, you know, and then the experience framework is, what is his journey? What content does he value? What does he want to feel from the organization? And what kind of differentiators? That's what the journeys that I do, that's what they include. So one client took these further than just these sheets. And this was mine. When I worked back in the day, I worked for the National Association of Realtors. I made life-size cutouts of the personas that we created, and I put them outside my office. So whenever anybody came to me and said, hey, we have this new initiative and we want you to add a whole new section of the website, it was like, let's walk over here and look at our personas and say, well, what would this audience segment, what do they want from this? What does this look like to them? How would they want this? Or is this relevant to them? So getting the audience to be part of that discussion. This particular client took each of the personas and blew them up into posters. And they took them a step further than this, and they actually made little short videos introducing them to the rest of the staff. And that was really good because then they could, have it on the intranet if people wanted to go back and look at them again, but really having the audience in the room with them as much as possible on a regular basis makes all the difference. So, and there's ways to make it fun, right? So you can do laminated cards of the personas. You can have scavenger hunts to find content rot. You can have jargon bingo, which is probably the easiest of all, or the pens and the stickers, which stickers like sneaky reinforcement of the concepts, the content strategy concepts. Or there's memes. So in the early days of the pandemic in Chicago, everybody created memes about our mayor, Lori Lightfoot, about, stay home, stay safe. And she had a very, very funny TV commercial showing herself baking badly or playing the guitar badly or all the other things that people are doing. And people really ran with that idea of memes. So no lakefront for you, come back in a year. And these were things I found on Facebook, but everybody have at it. So let people have fun with your content strategy concepts and with the ideas that you're putting forth to use them. Have a contest, right? So really get people involved and help people be proud of their successes. So this was a school where, their saying was damn proud because it was the initials of the college, I think. But, let them brag. Bragging can be really good. And ultimately, the goal here is that content strategy really becomes part of how things work. So operationalizing is making content part of how it works. And socializing is spreading the word. So it's not just you who know it, it's everybody who knows it. So here's a list of all the resources I mentioned. So you can either take a screenshot of this right now, or you'll, you can, I'll send that slide deck tonight. So you'll get that. So there's all kinds of good stuff in here. And please, please, please stay in touch. I have a content strategy community that I run with 1,000 content strategists in it. So that's the last link. I have a newsletter, and keep in touch. So what other questions? I haven't looked at the chat. Well, let's stop sharing.
Thanks, Hilary. We had one question come in from Jackie. Jackie asks, I'm curious how you would compare content strategy with other strategic roles doing similar work like UX, CX strategy. And Jackie, if you want to chime in and elaborate on that, feel free.
Yeah, I'm just curious because you mentioned, content is our content and it's, connected to business strategy, it's connected to the product, it's connected to so many things. So it just made me think about, a lot of that work is done also by UX people, CX people. So just curious if you see a differentiation between those roles or collaboration, anything around that.
Well, so things vary sometimes from organization to organization for sure. But UX people's main job is to defend and advocate for the audience. Content strategists really bridge not only the audience needs, but the organization needs in a way that tends to go deeper than UX people do, or CX for that matter. So organizations need both of those functions because they're very, they view the world from the inside out, from their perspective out. And the CX people and UX people really give the counterpart perspective about the outside in. Content strategists tend to bridge both, and they also get involved ideally in a different way in the content management system than the UX people do. So I used to give a talk, years ago, about UX people sort of go from the top down. they talk about the task flow and that kind of thing. And they don't think about whether there's content to power every step in the task flow. The content people start with what is the work and how does that fit? And both of those are counterparts to each other. So it looks like Marvel
Yeah,
has something to add.
oh, I was just going to say, Katie, the next question I saw in the queue was Katie. And Katie, I might have you ask this question because you have some, it sounds like you want to phrase it. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Hilary. My question is, it sounds like a lot of these best practices are geared toward folks that wear a content hat some of the time, like maybe content isn't their full-time role, but would you really adapt these best practices if the sort of content strategy world that you're trying to get to stick is actually content people who are all doing the content work?
It's hard to say that in the abstract. Do you have a specific, like, are they in a media company or something?
I mean, let's just say, like, here's my specific context is like, let's say it's a tech company that has a big ecosystem of content folks, but they're somewhat siloed. But really at the heart, these folks are content focused people. It's not that they're just putting that hat on from time to time.
So then, I mean, then maybe they don't need help in the how to write part, but they would need help in agreeing on what's the single taxonomy, what's the single voice and tone, what's the single set of priorities that everything ladders up into. So not
You use kind of a lot of the same like carrot stick mentality to, yeah, gotcha.
Yep. That makes sense?
Yep, absolutely.
What else?
Kevin has a question about, and Kevin, if you're still here, if you could unmute and ask the question, just so I get the nuances right.
Sure. I am in a dual role where I have to create a lot of content for devs, but now I'm also told I need to become the content strategist for the engineering division for our company and our subsidiary companies, and it just seems like a lot for one person to do. I was wondering if you have any tips. There's no way I'm getting an extra headcount, so what would you suggest?
So there is a great series of articles from the Stanford Social Innovation Review, and the center one, which is super helpful, is called "The Four Dysfunctions of a Digital Team," something like that. And it was a series of 3 articles, and they're old. They're from 2011. But the thing that I love about these articles is that they have a physical picture of how digital teams can look. And the hybrid model is the one that I always recommend clients have, which is kind of this shared accountability and shared workload between setting policy and kind of executing everything. Even if you did have a giant team, a centralized team isn't efficient and is very expensive. A totally decentralized team is likely to not be consistent, and has other challenges as well, kind of rogue. So a balance is that there's a central team that sets policy and they empower, they empower people in each division to be accountable, sort of shared accountability, and both by being charged with executing the policy as well as bringing forth ideas for how things might evolve. So it's this kind of shared ownership, but a distributed model. Because you can't be accountable instead of everybody being accountable. Everybody has to be a little accountable, and then you're going to be like in a reviewer kind of role. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
that,
no, that's very helpful. Thanks.
yeah, Stanford Social Innovation Review. I will find a link and send it. I closed my email just so I wouldn't have things popping up during this call, but it's something that I share on a regular basis, even though they're so old, but they're really good.
I just want to mention one thing. A couple of folks had asked about joining our local Slack, and I just dropped an invitation link in the chat. So if anybody wants to join, and Hilary, I hope you'll join us.
Yeah, I totally will.
I'm not seeing any more questions right now. Anybody else have any questions? I have a question, Hilary, about carrots and sticks and M&Ms and all that good stuff. I find like case studies or examples really helpful of, because human behavior is so finicky. And do you have any like really stellar examples of like things that really worked, especially on the carrot side, incentives, or I guess any good stories there?
So when I worked at the National Association of Realtors, in most associations, and I don't know how many association people we have here, there's always one particular group that is a bit of an outlier. And they are the government affairs group, the people who do the advocacy and lobbying with government officials for issues that are of interest and import to a particular profession. And so our government affairs people really were wanting to either use their own channels or operate in a vacuum or not share information about what they were working on, even though the members were reading about this same kind of issues in the regular national news. So they want to know, what is my association doing about this issue? Flood insurance, mortgage interest deduction, whatever it might be. And they got a communications person in that division, in that department, and it made a huge difference in their willingness to work with us. And so he was a tremendous liaison to the rest of the group to bring those policies back to his colleagues and bring ideas to us from them. And we were having lunch one time, and we were, both frustrated at how we don't know, we didn't share metrics, and we needed to do something different because the more we did, the less people were reading, the less people were using, because our members were just overwhelmed with content. And so he and I came up with this idea to do a content summit. And we assembled a team to invent it with us. And we, created what the format was going to be. And it was going to take a representative from each of the 23 departments that created content for the organization, AKA programs, products, services, all that stuff that I talked about at the beginning, and make it better, make it make more sense. And so we asked first we had to identify who were even the content creators. So we did this internal survey of the staff, and everybody and their brother created content. And so that's how we learned that, in fact, there were 23 departments that created content for the organization. And we invited them to send us samples. We asked them to send us samples of everything they did so that we all knew. And then we had this 2-day summit. And the first day was walk everybody through what you did. So by the end of the day, we all needed a drink, first of all. I called it the recitation because it took the entire day to go through all the stuff. And it was overwhelming. No wonder our members were overwhelmed. And we also had a market research department that served as the gatekeeper for how many emails, but they had data that showed over the years our email volume increased like this and our open rates went like this. And so, that data that we had was very powerful because we had never put it together in front of everybody at the same time. And so then by day 2, we could work it through, broke up into small groups. So what should we do about it? So we reduced the number of e-newsletters we sent, slashed them, And my group was charged then with creating the framework for a single weekly newsletter that everybody could contribute to, but there'd be a vetting kind of editorial process. And it wasn't just a marketing vehicle. It was really for everything that the organization did. And it was done in cooperation, that whole with you, not to you idea. And we had a representative team of people inventing the event and then creating it from there. And then we got buy-in from all the senior VPs of every division, every department.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see, any other questions from folks? Feel free to chime in.
I think we might be kind of starting to hit the dinner hour here in Seattle, but if anyone else has questions, definitely throw them out there. Otherwise, you know, as we've said, stay in touch with Hilary, stay in touch with the meetup. We'd love to see you all again. We do these events every month. So we'll be announcing our October event soon. We hope to see you all there.